What if a wedding day hides a veil of secrets under its flowers? At a Boston suburb hotel, a sister's happiness awakens whispers of loss and distrust. You are welcome to Revenza Tales, where love and peril mingle. Brace yourself for a romance that warms and freezes the heart. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell to become a part of the mystery. Leave a comment with your city and let us know, have you ever sensed family hiding more than showing? Let's enter Emily's world, where a party keeps secrets. In the Grand Harbor Hotel parking lot, a longtime suburban Boston hotel, Emily Chambers held her 5-year-old son Jacob's hand tightly. The October afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow, illuminating her black dress with a soft sheen. Today was her sister Sophia's wedding day, a milestone tinged with both joy and bittersweet memories. "Mommy, is my tie okay?" Jacob asked, his small hand brushing his chest, his dark eyes seeking approval. "Perfect, Jacob," Emily said, leaning down to plant a gentle kiss on his cheek, her lips lingering with love. Ever since she lost her husband Michael in a road accident 3 years ago, Jacob had been her only anchor. Technically, her mother Margaret and sister Sophia, who were welcoming them today, were family as well. But in the 3 years after Michael's death, Emily had discovered the hard way. Blood and heart relationships weren't always synonymous, a reality seared into her aloneness. As they entered the hotel lobby, voices of relatives they had not seen in years rang out in the air. The bright lights of the chandelier cast a festive, ethereal glow on the polished marble floors. Aunt Dorothy was the first to see them, hurrying over with overacted gestures, bangles jingling. "Emily, it's been so long," she cried, eyes widening with worry. "My goodness, you've lost so much weight. Are you eating all right?" "Yes, I'm fine," Emily smiled, her voice steady despite the scrutiny. "You look well yourself." Over the past 3 years, she'd worked at a small accounting firm while raising Jacob. She had lost weight, yes, but it had sculpted her into a more toned figure, a quiet strength emerging. "This must be Jacob," Dorothy said, bending to his eye level, her voice softening. "Last time I saw him, he was only a baby, and now see how big he's grown." "You have your father's face." Michael had been a good man, a decent, considerate architect whose memory lingered in Jacob's embarrassed smile. Because of his life insurance, Emily was able to juggle work and motherhood, an uncertain equilibrium. Jacob hung on her leg, his recollections of Michael hazy but influenced by her tales. As they walked into the building, a stunning view met them, pink and white flowers spilling over from all directions. Sophisticated and elegant, the decor showed Sophia's exquisite taste, a reflection of her sense. Emily searched for their seating area, her heart rising yet tinged with memories of resentments. Her mother Margaret appeared, arms open wide. "Emily, I'm so glad you're here," she hugged her daughter with an embrace that was comforting yet daunting. A retired grade school teacher, Margaret had moved to spoiling Jacob, her love ever present. From Emily's point of view, however, that affection at times crossed into overindulgence. "Of course, Mom," Emily said, her voice soft. "It's Sophia's birthday." "Jacob, come to Grandma," Margaret enticed, scooping her grandson up in a smile. "I have a special toy for you." She produced a red sports car from a tiny paper bag, its shiny finish sparkling in Jacob's eyes. "Can you picture earning $10,000 a month on YouTube alone, from home?" Margaret joined in, her voice filled with brightness. "That's what I did with stories. No voice, no face. Look at the link in the description if you're interested." Jacob's face lit up, his little hands grasping the toy. "Thanks, Grandma," he tweeted, his joy brief respite. Emily smiled, her heart full, but a glimmer of struggle stirred within. Margaret's overconcern for Jacob usually came with elaborate instructions on his treatment. She understood that it was motivated by love, but the intrusion at times felt like a burden, a load against her autonomy. "By the way, did you explain Jacob's shrimp allergy to them?" Emily inquired, her tone filled with worry. Margaret nodded reassuringly. "Of course, I already told both the wedding coordinator and the master chef. A children's special menu has been designed, so don't fret." Jacob started driving his new toy car along the table, its wheels whirring quietly. He wasn't especially interested in conversations between grown-ups, much preferring his fantasy world. This focus was reminiscent of his late father's single-mindedness, something Emily had cherished. Guests continued to trickle in, filling the establishment with Sophia's group of friends, the groom's relations, and distant relatives. Emily chatted socially, her smile honed, but with a watchful eye on Jacob. She wished to prevent him from becoming bored, and more importantly, that he stayed safe. 3 years since the accident, Emily confessed that she may have overdone protection. Michael's sudden loss had recast her priorities, and Jacob's safety became her top priority. Sophia's happy day was today, a day she longed to celebrate. If they could drive through it peacefully without any trouble, that would be fine. Jacob looked up at her, his red toy car moving, his face reassured. In his own childlike way, he knew the grief of losing his father, an unspoken connection between them. At 2 p.m., the ceremony started, the doors to the venue opening in anticipation. First came the bride's father, Emily's stepfather Robert, Margaret's remarried husband and Sophia's real dad. Their affair was friendly, but the absence of blood relations had a reserved distance, a silent chasm. Then all eyes focused in one direction. Sophia appeared in a spotless white wedding dress, her loveliness otherworldly. The lace-trimmed, bead-covered dress highlighted her slender body like a portrait figure. Sophia was Emily's antonym, dramatic, always captivating with a spontaneous charm. Beautiful, Jacob whispered barely audibly, his tone a boy's wonder. Emily, too, had been enchanted, her love unadulterated, jealousy-free. Sophia had been beautiful since childhood, outgoing, a contrast to Emily's studious introversion. David, the bridegroom standing at the altar, had tears welling up in his eyes as he looked at Sophia. At 35, he was a financier with an investment firm, tall and lean, his presence authoritative. He'd met Sophia a year ago at a friend's party, their wedding after 6 months of courtship. Emily had initially been concerned about the speed, but their affectionate interactions alleviated her fears. The words of the minister resonated in the hall, solemn and unequivocal. Dearly beloved friends, welcome to this wedding ceremony of David Harrison and Sophia Chambers. Emily's thoughts went back to her wedding 3 years ago to Michael. It had been a small, warm gathering of family and close friends, a stark contrast to today's glamour. Over 100 guests filled the room, each ceremony reflecting the couple's choice, neither better, just different. Vows were exchanged, their voices trembling with emotion. David, I'm truly happy to have met you, Sophia said, her words heartfelt. I'm thankful from the heart that we can stroll through life together now on. Sophia, you filled my life with light, said David, his tone firm. Regardless of what troubles come, I vow to defend and keep loving you. Emily dabbed at the corners of her eyes with her handkerchief, the sweetness touching her. Margaret wept softly next to her, her tears matching Emily's. Jacob felt the seriousness, setting his toy car on his lap, his face solemn. Before all of you here, we declare that we will proceed as husband and wife in a new life together, declared the minister. Warm clapping filled the air, the space filled with cheer. The reception hall was next, where they faced even more extravagant decorations. Each table was filled with white roses and pink gerberas, the soft candlelight filling the room with a warm glow. Emily and Jacob were ushered to the family table, where Margaret, Robert, and other family members sat. Speeches started before the meal, the groom's father standing first. Everyone in our family is thrilled that our son David has been able to marry so lovely a woman, he said. Sophia, please take good care of our son. Next, Robert took the microphone, his voice proud. Since she was small, Sophia has been like sunshine. She always brightened everything around her and brought smiles to our family. Today, seeing her make a happy marriage, I'm truly proud as a father. Emily listened, her feelings mixed, Robert's affection genuine yet tinged with distance. Being Margaret's daughter from a previous marriage, she was always a bit of an outsider, no ill will meant. Sophia's voice caught during the bride and groom greetings. Thank you all so much for being here today, she exclaimed, her eyes welling up with tears. I'm particularly thankful to the family who has encouraged me all along. Mom, Dad, and Emily, she continued, smiling at Emily. Emily has always told me the truth when I've been unsure. Even after she lost Michael, the way she still lives bravely is my role model. Emily couldn't help but feel a warmth in her chest, her sister's words filling the gap in their complicated relationship. Deep affection beneath the years was its underlying core. At that moment, Margaret put her hand on Emily's shoulder, her hand gentle with concern. Are you tired? She asked, her brow wrinkling. You look a bit pale. I'm fine, Emily replied, dismissing it. Just a little sleep-deprived. But her mother's anxious look remained, she urged. Have you been eating well recently? Perhaps you should lay off the wine. I'm actually fine, Emily replied, becoming more puzzled, a slight unease entering in. She had been busy with work of late and was tired, but nothing serious. But her mother Margaret's over-the-top worrying created a picture that she was not well, a shadow over the happiness. Jacob did not pay attention to the conversation of the adults, his red toy car humming on the table in silence. The wheels of the car buzzed softly, a constant beat on the highly polished wood. Sometimes, when groups of children laughed at another table, he would look in that direction. Because of his shyness, he did not actively try to mingle, his little body huddled close. Jacob, why don't you go out and play with the other kids? Margaret asked, her voice gentle. Jacob shook his head, his dark eyes locked on Emily. I want to be by Mommy's side. Emily stroked her son's head softly, her fingers running through his soft hair. He too, from what he had learned of losing his father, did not want to be away from her. It was an instinctive response, the result of a mutual sorrow that held them close. As part of the entertainment session, Sophia's friends danced, their steps elegant and vigorous. The hall was filled with joyful laughter, a lively counterpoint to Emily's increasing discomfort. The bride and bridegroom became participants in the dancing, their happiness contagious as guests warmly applauded. Emily applauded with Jacob, observing her sister's joyful face with a reluctant grin. But her mother Margaret's worry remained, a constant ache at her elbow. Are you getting enough water? Margaret asked, her forehead creased. Are you dizzy at all? Mom, honestly there's nothing to be worried about, Emily replied, her good nature fraying. But she did start wondering if there was some underlying reason for her mother's near-abnormal worry. A hint of doubt crept in, unwanted but unwavering, under the surface of the wedding. Though today was her sister's wedding day, a time to rejoice despite the tension. She chose to put such thoughts aside until later, concentrating on the fragile peace of the present. With the evening drawing near, the hour of the main dish approaching, the air grew heavy with expectation. Jacob looked a bit weary from the lengthy ceremony and reception, his stamina faltering. Due to his toy car, however, he was in high spirits, its red sheen a tiny consolation. Emily observed her son, her heart resenting the desire that this serene period could be an endless one. At 6 p.m., the warm light of evening streamed into the hall, forming long shadows over the tables. Waiters hurried around, their trays full as they prepared the main courses with professional ease. Every table was to be served roast beef, grilled chicken, and special seafood plates ordered. The scent of seasoned meat and herbs filled the air, a foretaste of the feast ahead. Emily was going to call over a waiter to confirm what Jacob would be eating, her safety instincts jumping into gear. For Jacob's share, please ensure that it has no shrimp, she instructed firmly. Okay, the young waiter said gratefully, his nod ensuring. We have a special children's menu, so don't worry. Jacob sat on, playing with his red toy car, its movement a silent diversion. But following the lengthy reception, boredom set in, his little hands yearning for fresh diversion. He started playing a game of rolling the car to the edge of the table, then sliding it down like a slide to the floor. Jacob, don't drop your car, Emily warned, her tone soft but unyielding. For a 5-year-old boy, however, it was a tempting game, the excitement of the fall irresistible. Sure enough, the toy car went flying with force, spinning to a halt on the deep carpet below. Jacob quickly raised the tablecloth and crept underneath, his small form disappearing into the darkness. Jacob, get out of there, said Emily, her heart racing. It's not safe. But her son was already raking out the toy car from the tight space under it. Under the table, there was a labyrinth of adults' feet and handbags, the air stuffy and dusty. Jacob crawled about, his hands sliding along the carpet, when he saw a tiny white rectangle of paper. It had dropped close to his grandmother Margaret's handbag, its rim showing from the pocket. A crumpled memo sheet, its presence strange in the celebratory atmosphere, drew his attention. Jacob found it, his recent training in reading single words piquing interest. The memo contained a brief sentence in careful writing, its meaning gradually sinking in. Table 8, he read to himself, his lips moving with care. Please include shrimp as part of the main dish. Don't worry about allergies. M. Jacob put the words together. Table 8. Shrimp. He knew their table was 8, and shrimp created an uneasy unease in his breast. It was a word he'd been hearing all his life from his mother, a warning impressed on his childish mind. Jacob never must eat shrimp. It's very dangerous. In his 5-year-old fashion, Jacob knew something was very bad. He also noticed that the final M coincided with his grandmother Margaret's first letter. His tiny hands started shaking, and a chill of fear crept over him. Why had his grandmother directed that shrimp be added, which was hazardous for him? His little brain couldn't quite understand the reason, but instinct ally it cried danger, a raw warning. Jacob hastily scrambled back over the table, his red toy car grasped like a lifeline. He pulled on his mother's arm, his voice tiny and shaking. "Mommy? What's wrong, Jacob?" Emily asked, seeing the unusual change in his demeanor. "Did you find your car?" "Mommy, take me home now," Jacob begged, holding onto her arm with desperate force. "What's wrong?" Emily asked, shocked at her son's unusual determination. "It's still dinner time, let's wait a bit longer." Jacob looked towards his grandmother, his eyes wide with fear. Margaret was chatting happily with other guests, laughing brightly and unaware of anything. To Jacob, however, that smile was no longer comforting. It hid something evil. "Hey, Jacob," Emily said, looking into his face, becoming concerned. "Why do you want to go home all of a sudden?" Jacob spoke in a weak voice, his sentences stammering. "You didn't check under the table." "Did you? Under the table?" Emily asked, confused, her heart pounding. "What happened?" Her son, shaking, extended the white piece of paper he'd been holding, its edges wrinkled. Emily reached out and took it, reading the words within as the blood left her face. "Table 8, she breathed, the words settling in. "Add shrimp to the main course. Don't worry about allergies. Her hands trembled, the memo's meaning crashing over her. Jacob's shrimp allergy was serious. If he ate it, he'd have trouble breathing. At worst, it was life-threatening, something she'd lived with since his diagnosis. And this order had obviously been given by her mother, Margaret, the M, a sinister signature. Why? Why would her mother issue orders that put her darling grandson's life in jeopardy? Questions raged in Emily's mind, a maelstrom of doubt and fear. She remembered how Margaret had been unusually anxious about her condition during the entire day. It was as if she'd been anticipating something happening, a calculated concern. "Mommy, I'm scared," Jacob said, burying his face in her lap, his small body trembling. Emily held her son tightly, her eyes scanning the room with new suspicion. Margaret chatted with guests, her demeanor unchanged. Sophia talked happily with the groom, their laughter a stark contrast to Emily's dread. Other relatives enjoyed the evening, their smiles seeming artificial now. At that moment, waiters started serving the main courses, the rattling of trays heightening her desperation. Emily stood up, grasping Jacob's hand firmly. "Jacob, we have to leave here immediately," she whispered, her tone low but insistent. "Where are you off to?" Margaret wheeled around, looking perplexed. "Dinner has just begun." Emily gazed at her mother, pleading for honesty behind that sweet face. 3 years before, when Michael had passed away, she'd gotten a huge life insurance claim. That fund was meant for Jacob as beneficiary, with her acting as guardian until he reached adulthood. But if anything were to happen to her, who would the next guardian be? A ghastly possibility entered her head, somber and unimaginable. Her mother's erratic concern and the memo threatening Jacob's life, it wasn't coincidence. This was something orchestrated, an evil conspiracy in the making. "Mom," Emily said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "We'll be leaving early." "Why?" Margaret asked, her confusion seeming forced. "Dinner has just started, there's even dessert prepared that Jacob likes." To Emily, even that confusion felt like an act, a mask slipping. "I'm not feeling well," Emily answered briefly, gripping Jacob's hand tighter. Jacob trusted his mother's decision, silently following, his eyes avoiding Margaret. He gazed up at his grandmother, but no love, only a strange fear. "Wait, Emily." Sophia stood up from the chair, her voice becoming louder. "What's wrong?" "It's my wedding day." Emily faced her sister, hesitation masking her thoughts. Did Sophia really not know anything, or was she in on this betrayal? She couldn't trust anyone in her family right now, the relationship broken. "Sophia, congratulations," Emily said, extending her hand with an insincere smile. "It was a lovely wedding. Be happy." That handshake was goodbye, A silent release. Emily grasped Jacob's hand and walked toward the function exit, her strides determined. Margaret followed in hot pursuit at that moment, her tone cutting. "Emily, stop. What did you do?" Emily spun back around, stilling the memo outstretched in her hand. "Can you tell me about this?" Margaret went white, the color ebbing as if proven a liar. In that moment, Emily realized all. This was no accident. It was a calculated crime against her dear son's life. And the mastermind behind it was her own mother, the truth a blade to her heart. Jacob held his mother's hand firmly, his words barely above a whisper. "Mommy, let's go home." Emily scooped up her son, his tiny body secure in her arms, and started walking towards the door. She could hear Margaret and Sophia's voices at her back, urgent and beseeching. But she didn't glance back, her mind fixed on flight, on survival. As Emily entered the hotel lobby, footsteps sounded behind. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw Margaret and Sophia running desperately, their faces twisted with anguish. Sophia clutched the skirt of her wedding gown, tears streaming down her face as she pursued her sister. "Emily, wait!" Sophia wept, her voice cracking. "What's wrong? My wedding is being ruined." Emily halted, turning while gripping Jacob tightly. Her son clung to her neck, his face turned away from his grandmother and aunt. "Sophia, I'm sorry," Emily said, her voice calm but laced with deep anger. "But this isn't about your wedding. Ask Mom. Have her explain this memo." Emily held out the white piece of paper again, its words a silent accusation. Sophia took it, reading aloud with a trembling voice. "Table 8. Please add shrimp to the main dish. Don't worry about allergies. M." Sophia's face went white, the understanding dawning. "This is regarding Jacob's allergy to shrimp, isn't it?" "But why would there be such a memo?" Emily glared at Margaret, her eyes challenging her. "Explain. Why did you issue orders that would kill my son?" Margaret clapped her shaking hands over her lips, her facade disintegrating. For a moment, the guise of the benevolent grandmother slipped away, and a cornered woman was seen. "Emily, you're misunderstanding," Margaret stuttered, her voice trembling. "I adore Jacob. Why on earth would I do that? So this memo is what?" Emily's voice rose as her rage broke out. "It's written in your handwriting, isn't it? That's why you were oddly concerned about my health all day, right? Because you realized something was going to occur, wasn't it?" The other guests in the lobby caught on to the disturbance, turning their heads in interest. But Emily no longer gave a hoot about their glares. Her son's safety was her only concern. "Mom, you actually didn't." Sophia gazed at her mother, incredulity etched in her face. It was then that Margaret abruptly burst into tears, her wails ringing out in the lobby. She dropped to her knees on the shining floor, burying her face in both shaking hands. "I'm sorry," she wailed, her voice shaking with remorse. "I'm sorry." Emily and Sophia stood in shock, their breathing held in the charged air. Jacob curled up in his mother's arms, his tiny body against her chest. "I'll tell you everything," Margaret explained through her sobs, her voice shattering. "But not here. Somewhere quiet." Inside a quiet room at the back of the hotel lounge, Margaret opened her heavy mouth, the silence dense. The room's dim light cast shadows on the walls, amplifying the gravity of her words. Sophia had chosen to be present, despite her wedding's chaos, informing David of a family emergency. "It's about Michael's life insurance money," Margaret began in a small voice, her eyes downcast. "Jacob is the beneficiary, and you're managing it as his guardian." Emily listened silently, her arms wrapped protectively around her son. That was right, she reflected, remembering how she'd prudently handled those funds for Jacob's future. "If anything were to happen to you," Margaret went on, her voice shaking, "I would be the next guardian. And then there are issues with Sophia's marriage that you know nothing about." Sophia glanced up, her bewilderment evident. "Issues with my marriage? What do you mean?" Margaret gazed at Sophia, her eyes tired. "David's investment company went under 3 months ago. He's got huge debt." Sophia rose to her feet, her voice outraged. "That can't be true. David is an investor. I heard his business was prosperous." "Sophia, sit down," Margaret instructed, her voice weary, her shoulders slumping. "David is bankrupt, and he came to me asking for assistance. As part of the marriage bargain, he asked me to assume his debts. Emily was starting to get the big picture, the pieces falling into a horrifying pattern. So then, if I were to die in an accident, she said calmly, you would take over as Jacob's guardian. You would use that inheritance to settle David's debts and save Sophia's marriage. I was trapped, Margaret acknowledged, resting her head as though to hold her thoughts. I was trying to keep Sophia happy. And David threatened me. He told me if I couldn't repay the loan, the wedding would be off. Sophia fell into her chair, her hands shaking. My wedding was over money issues? David doesn't love me? I don't know that, Margaret replied, her tone empty. But he was certainly in debt and eyeing our family assets. Emily cradled Jacob in her lap, reasoning clearly though turmoil raged within. So, what was the plan for today? She asked, her voice cold. Following my son's allergic reaction and hospitalization, were you going to do something to me as well? Margaret shook her head, crying. No, not that far. Only while Jacob was hospitalized, I was going to give you sleeping pills and make it appear as an accident. Mean you were going to kill me and stage it as an accident? Emily's voice was ice cold, her temper repressed. I was confused, Margaret wept, her hands gripping the folds of her dress. I couldn't make rational decisions. I just wanted to safeguard my much-loved daughter's happiness. Sophia rose to her feet, her voice trembling with anger. You were going to kill my sister and nephew for me? You thought that was my happiness? Sophia, you don't get it, Margaret begged, her eyes pleading. You're being misled by David. He's a man in deep debt who's going after our holdings. Then why didn't you explain it to me right from the start? Sophia's voice was shaking with rage. Why did you decide to murder my sister? Emily got up, holding Jacob's hand firmly. That's enough, she said, her determination firming. I don't want to hear any more. Emily, wait, Sophia pleaded, her eyes wide with regret. I didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything. I understand that, Sophia, Emily replied, meeting her sister's gaze. But we're not family anymore. The moment Mom tried to kill us, everything ended. Margaret stood up, her voice breaking. Emily, please. I made a mistake. But Jacob is my grandson. Don't take him away from me. You tried to kill my son, Emily said, her voice resolute, cutting through the pleas. Never approach us again. Emily tugged Jacob's arm and headed towards the door of the private room, her movements careful. Sophia pursued them at that moment, with her wedding gown flowing behind her. Emily, what am I to do? She cried out, desperation filling her voice. The wedding. David. Emily faced her, with a resolute but kind look on her face. That is for you to choose, Sophia, she replied calmly. But what I do know is that there ain't no true happiness in a relationship with a man who marries for money. Emily emerged from the hotel into the night air, cool against her skin. Outside, it was pitch dark, but in her heart was a light of determination. Their new life would now start from today, a new chapter unblemished by betrayal. In the automobile, Jacob spoke softly. Mommy, won't we ever see Grandma again? That's right, Jacob, Emily said, running her hand through his hair in gentle concern. But we have each other. That's enough. Jacob nodded, as if he comprehended, his faith in her unshakable. 3 months passed, and in a tiny apartment in Portland, Oregon, Emily welcomed a new morning with Jacob. The autumn sunlight poured through the window, lighting their humble but cozy living room. It was a change from their sumptuous existence in Boston, where emptiness had been covered by wealth. But here, there was peace, a treasure more valuable than gold. Mommy, can we please go to the park today? Jacob asked, spooning his breakfast cereal with a wide grin. Yes, Emily replied, her grin copying his. Perhaps you'll find new friends. The move from Boston had not been simple, a painful severing of the past. But Emily was left with no option following that night's revelations. Having departed the hotel, she had immediately sought advice from a lawyer and the police. Restraining orders had already been placed against Margaret and Sophia, a legal safeguard around her family. She was now safe from their grasp, a buffer zone for Jacob's future. Emily had begun working in a small accounting firm in the new city. The pay was lower than her Boston position, but it included more time with Jacob, a sacrifice she valued. She still took care of the insurance proceeds Michael had left, preserving them for her son's aspirations. On her desk were 3 letters, still unopened, their corners frayed from age. Each of these was an apology from Margaret, her script a silent cry. Emily never opened them, planning on throwing them away without so much as a look. Regardless of the words, the fact that her son's life had been targeted was an indelible mark. Jacob was settling in, his laughter illuminating their new house with light. He had friends at the nearby kindergarten, his shine overcoming the shadows of Boston. He would occasionally ask for his grandmother, his questioning gentle. "She lives very far away," Emily told him, her tone soft. "So we can't visit her for a while." "Mommy, when do we get to go to Daddy's grave?" Jacob blurted, his eyes shining with hope. Emily hesitated, caught speechless for a moment. Michael's grave was in Boston, far out of reach. But she wished to show respect for her son's attitude toward his father. "We will go someday for sure," she vowed, smiling. "Daddy is glad that we are living healthily." A few days later, Emily discovered an article on Boston in the local paper, its title striking. Sophia and David's marriage collapsed in only 2 months, the union falling apart. David's investment scam was exposed by the article, his actions subjecting him to lawsuits by several investors. Only recently after the wedding had Sophia discovered the truth and filed for divorce. Emily read with conflicting emotions, still seething with anger towards her sister. But she couldn't help wondering whether Sophia also was a victim, misled by David's deceit. Yet, she had no wish to get in touch, the hurt too raw to mend. Another paper stated Margaret by herself, her loneliness stark. Neighbors had described her as isolated, out of contact with Sophia and not allowed to see Jacob. She was probably pining for the loss of her decisions, a voluntary banishment. Emily creased up the newspaper, her mind now turned to the future with her son. In the afternoon, while Jacob played with some other kids at the park, Emily spoke to a young mother. "Your child is very intelligent," said the woman with a warm smile. "He hit it off immediately with my daughter." "Thank you," said Emily, feeling her heart grow warm. "Actually, we just relocated here recently." "I see," nodded the woman. "If ever you need something, please don't hesitate to call us. Everybody in this town is so nice." Emily felt a warmth different from Boston's glamorous circles, where genuine connections had been rare. That night, after putting Jacob to bed, Emily stood by the window, gazing at the clear night sky. The stars shone brightly, a quiet beauty over the small town. "Michael, we're okay," she whispered to her late husband in her heart. "Jacob is growing up healthy too." True family isn't about blood ties, she reflected, her voice a silent vow, but about caring for each other. The next morning, Jacob sat at the breakfast table, his voice bright. "Mommy, I'm happiest when I'm with you." Emily hugged her son, her arms a shield of love. "Me too, Jacob," she said, her smile genuine. "We're a small but very strong family." She had lost the wealthy life in Boston, but Emily felt no regret. She had discovered true happiness, a money can't buy treasure, with her son, and was certain they could face any obstacles that lay ahead together. In the new town, a new life started, with every day creating true family ties. Overcoming pain of the past, they made a future based on trust and love. In Revenza Tales, betrayal makes a trail to learn anew about family based on love's strength, rather than blood. This tale teaches that real bonds are created in care, not duty, and provides strength greater than blood. Did Emily's story speak to your own family realities? Let us know and your city below. Where have you discovered your true family? Like, subscribe, and super support thanks to keep these stories alive. Dig deeper in the links, and may your heart create a family of love chosen.